Hey guys, another one take review. Today I wanted to talk about Ben Folds' 2001 solo effort, Rockin' the Suburbs. Up until about mid last year, I was actually weirdly unfamiliar with Ben Folds. I'm surprised that I wasn't, honestly. I have a love for piano rock and singer-songwriter types. I will gladly list Warren Zevon and older artists from the genre as among my personal favorites. And it was just odd that I'd never actually checked out Ben Folds besides the Over the Hedge soundtrack, which I mean, that doesn't really count, and that doesn't. So I just decided to give this one a listen in about September of last year, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. Like I said, big reason that I'm surprised I haven't checked out his stuff before listening to this record is I'm just a really big fan of piano rock, and I was pretty curious to see how he was as an actual pianist here. And he does extremely well. He's extremely talented. Songs like Fired and Losing Lisa and Annie Waits all just have outstanding performances on there. He doesn't have like a super complicated playing style. He's not the classical fans pianist for sure, but at the same time, I'm a appreciator of that. I will gladly take some simplicity and emotional and lyrical power over complexity and shallowness, and Ben Folds really delivers the former right here. This is just strongly performed record that complements what he is going for, and conceptually everything works, and that's largely to thank to his piano skills. Of course, a very defining trait of Ben Folds' music over the years, and something that has arguably made him slightly the butt of many jokes over the years, is his very sarcastic sense of humor and his very occasionally over the top personality. I wouldn't exactly say over the top, maybe, but more so just viciously sarcastic at times, to the point where there are layers of irony of what he is saying. And some people can really hate this, and I think it's fair enough. I understand why people would not like that. But personally, I think it's well presented here. You've got tracks like Not the Same that really work with his personality. The title track, Rockin' the Suburbs, is just almost completely humorous and just sort of mocking the music industry of the early 2000s and the entire new metal scene and whatnot. Bands like Rage Against the Machine, which I think is hilarious because I personally am not a fan of those kind of bands. And I think it's all, pulled off well. I don't think it's ever really obnoxious, even though he does walk the line on occasion, but I don't think it's ever become obnoxious. I think it's just humor that's presented well in a very Ben Foldsy kind of way. I do enjoy his more tongue-in-cheek side, don't get me wrong. That's arguably my preferred side of his music. But at the same time, there are many tracks here that see him getting very serious, and I really appreciate those tracks as well, like Fred Jones Part 2. They're just done very well, they're done very tastefully, and they all have some great storytelling, and I really just can't complain about both the humorous side of Ben Folds and the serious dramaticist side of Ben Folds. Both are really great. Arguably, the dramatic side is the more honest side, but really either is just fantastically pulled off and comes across as very natural throughout Rockin' the Suburbs. Though I do feel with all of my talk of his sort of sarcasm and humor, I feel like I am sort of underrating Ben Folds' more melancholic side because he is the master of melancholy on this album. You've got songs that are just gorgeous, like The Ascent of Stan, and sort of have this just very strong atmosphere of just melancholy and just emotional hurt and emptiness, and it's great, and I love it. Or you have other songs like Still Fighting It that sort of have that bitterness of those more upbeat tracks, but with the atmosphere of, like I said before, songs like The Ascent of Stan that are sort of very melancholic and very emotionally vulnerable. And then you've even got really upbeat, melancholic songs like the incredibly good Time on the Surface, Carrie and Kathy, which is an incredibly depressing song, actually. But it still works incredibly well for some reason. I have no idea why, but it just does. And if there's one thing that Ben Folds does know how to do on this album, it's how to craft a really well written and moving melancholic song, even though he does it in a variety of ways. It's probably the thing that he is best at and most well known for, and that's fair enough. It just so happens that I do maybe slightly prefer his more upbeat stuff, and I do think that the melancholy may get slightly repetitive after a while. But in the end, if you're listening to individual tracks, there isn't a single bad song off of here, no matter what side of things you're picking. I do think a large factor that really carries rock in the suburbs, and arguably Ben Folds' is music in general, be it solo or with the Ben Folds 5, is this sort of youthful energy that Folds has throughout this record. He was 35 when this was actually recorded and released in 2001. But this really just feels like what one would stereotypically consider high schooler music, as in it's not exactly overly angsty, but it does sort of have a bitterness, I guess, that you would just associate with teen angst, if you will. And you could argue that it is sort of juvenile at times with the way songs like Zach and Sarah are presented. But at the same time, I feel like that really adds to the record overall. I think it kind of gives it a sort of oomph that it otherwise wouldn't have. It just, even though Folds was now, reaching middle age, he was sort of still able to create anthems for people that were 2 decades younger than him, which I not only find impressive, but I do think actually sort of heightens the quality of this record overall. So overall, I'm really glad that I finally listened to Rockin' in the Suburbs. It was an album that I waited way too long to listen to. Ben Folds was an artist that I waited way too long to listen to be honest. And it's a great record. There's outstanding piano. The lyricism is fantastic. Ben Folds has a very strong, distinct personality, and he really stands out because of that. And the album is better for it. This is just I can't think of any way to describe this album other than just complete. And I know that probably doesn't exactly make total sense, but there's just no other way I can really describe this album. I just complete is the way I would describe it. I'll give this 4 out of 5 stars. It is a really great album, and I do recommend that you go and listen to it. So yeah, with that being said, 4 stars out of 5. That's the end of this review. So I'll see you guys in the next one.